Are you suggesting that even though Russia was not present at the Washington summit, it is still Moscow that ultimately gets what it wants when it comes to implementing peace undertakings in this region?
Well, that's how it looks like. On the same page, they shouldn't be. They're not meant to be on the same page. So it is kind of disturbing that even after Washington summit, where the sides have declared that they want to come to peace themselves under the U.S. auspices, there is a need to stay on the same page with Russia.
Op-ed in the National Interest, which argued that President Aliyev should be responsible before any peace treaty is signed. How do you see this playing out?
There are currently almost 400 political prisoners in Azerbaijan, and many of them have long advocated for peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's not just a peace between countries, it's peace between people.
Hello again and welcome. I'm Dr. Joanne Lisosky, author and journalism educator. We're here to discuss issues of importance to the South Caucasus. I'm joined today by Sevinj Osmanqizi, noted Azerbaijani journalist. So it has been more than 2 weeks since the Washington summit hosted by President Trump between Azerbaijani and Armenian leaders. From your perspective, is there any progress going on with peace in that region, or is the process moving forward too slowly? Are there new obstacles that have emerged since the leaders returned home?
Unfortunately, we haven't seen much happening in the US. Like no working group either has been formed or announced or held its meeting. And on the other side, we've seen that Azerbaijan and Armenian leaders have been engaged, or foreign ministers have been engaged with talks with Russia and Iran. For instance, Iranian president visited Armenia to discuss exactly the consequences of the Washington summit. Also, the Russian and Iranian presidents spoke today. So I think we are seeing, and also Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov had a discussion with Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Bayramov, also to discuss the communique memoranda of the Washington summit. So looks like the more is happening with the regional actors, and we're not seeing much progress, or in fact, like let's say, visual diplomacy activity on the follow-up of the Washington summit.
So you just mentioned the recent meeting between Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Bayramov. Should we see this as a routine diplomatic update, or was it more of a political gesture to make sure that both sides are on the same page?
Well, first of all, I did check the news with the Russian TASS news agency, and it specifically mentioned that the meeting was requested by the Azerbaijani side. And also, on the same page, they shouldn't be. They're not meant to be on the same page. The whole idea of Washington summit is that Russian is not on the same page. So it is kind of disturbing that even after Washington summit, where the sides have declared that they want to come to peace themselves under the U.S. auspices, there is a need to stay on the same page with Russia.
So since the return from the Russian summit, the Azerbaijani and Armenian foreign ministers have formally appealed to the OSCE Secretariat to dissolve the Minsk Group, which for decades mediated the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. What does this move mean for Russia, and does it risk alienating Moscow, given that Russia was one of the 3 co-chairs? Is this bad news for the Kremlin?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, you're absolutely right that OSCE Minsk Group indeed unsuccessfully mediated for decades between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But the idea of dissolution of OSCE Minsk Group was very strongly supported by Russian foreign ministry. Indeed, Russian diplomats were the ones who spoke about this most frequent and most loudly. So, and I think there are reasons for that, because among the 3 co-chairs of the OSCE Minsk Group, Russia was the only co-chair that was left out, ignored. As Foreign Minister Lavrov once said in his interview, that they're meeting together, the French and US co-chairs, and Russian co-chair is not present. So it's not only bad news, I think it's a good news. In fact, it is actually upsetting that among the 17 articles of the Washington Summit memorandum, the site started implementing from that, something that actually Russia was looking forward. So I'm assuming that when the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry requested the meeting with Russian foreign minister, one of the things that they discussed was exactly that even though it was in the Washington and Russia was not present there, so one of its major demands have been already met or implemented, because, as you said, both Azerbaijan and Armenia did officially apply to OSCE Secretariat to dissolve the Minsk Group.
So are you suggesting that even though Russia was not present at the Washington summit, it is still Moscow that ultimately gets what it wants when it comes to implementing peace undertakings in this region?
Well, that's how it looks like, because we know that both Azerbaijan and Armenia have, to different degrees, are still dependent on Russia. And looks like it was important for the sides to make sure that nothing harmful or catastrophic happened to Russian interests at the Washington summit. Actually, if I may go back to the OSCE Minsk Group, I believe that requesting this dissolution of the Minsk Group was not in the best interest of Azerbaijan, because the very idea of Minsk Group, although it was indeed unsuccessful in mediating the sides or bringing the sides to the peace, nevertheless, it was the only platform that had international community, European countries, and Turkey present. If you get rid of the Minsk Group, there is no platform where neighboring Turkey will be represented. And it's important for Azerbaijan because, as you remember, the Minsk Group co-chairs included United States, which we believe is now taking the lead, the French co-chair, which is known to be on the pro-Armenian or supporter of Armenia, and having a country that would be representing Azerbaijan's interests, like Turkey, would be beneficial for Azerbaijan. And given how fast the Armenian and Turkish relations are developing, I don't think that Armenia would be against replacing Russia with Turkey. I think it will be in the best interests both Turkey and the Azerbaijan Armenia. So unfortunately, this never happened. Instead, the sides agreed to get rid of the Minsk Group altogether. Again, something that Moscow and Russian Foreign Ministry have been advocating for some time.
So how about the EU monitoring mission in Armenia? Looking back, was this also something that Russia actually wanted?
Absolutely, because Russia does not want any Europe or the West near to its borders. Getting rid of the EU mission on the border between Azerbaijan and Armenia is again one of the major demands of Russia. You know, as Azerbaijani journalist, the reaction that I'm hearing from the Azerbaijani side is that this mission hasn't done anything bad, detrimental for Azerbaijan's interests. On the contrary, having this mission on the border from the Armenia, because as you know, Azerbaijan did not agree to let the mission into its side on the border, only made the border more peaceful. Because having the monitors meant that a ceasefire has been observed. There were less deaths from both sides. So there's no reason why it should be sort of number one demand that this mission is sent back. And also what we're getting instead of that, now we're watching what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine war. Who would be the peace guarantor, or what would be the security guarantees for Azerbaijan-Armenia peace? Unfortunately, there isn't much talk about that.
So you mentioned earlier that the Russian and the Iranian presidents spoke today on the phone. And among other things they discussed, I believe, was the South Caucasus. They are also slated to meet in person later in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. How important is this development? Do you see it as a potential spoiler meeting for the peace process?
That's very well put, the spoilers meeting indeed, because no matter what is being said publicly, I'm absolutely sure that both Russia and Iran are indeed concerned over the peace talks. that they're not part of. And as when you look at the dynamics, is they're talking between themselves, they're talking with the sides, and now Putin and Pezeshkian are discussing it over the phone. I believe those statements, for instance, whatever Prime Minister Pezeshkian told Iranian Foreign Minister Pezeshkian when he visited the Armenian capital, was not enough. So they're not reassured that this does not damage their interests, because indeed there are so many open questions in the air. Would that involve only the American commercial company? Will there be any guarantees? Will there be any paramilitary and military, so on and so forth? And we're talking about for a very long period, 99 years lease, as they put it. So I am sure that there's a lot to be concerned. The very fact that they're already discussing it, I believe that there will be more reaction coming from both Iran and Russia.
So speaking about Russia, Russia has long sought a military presence in the Siunik or Zangezur region. Yet today, Moscow seems relatively compliant or even silent on this issue. How do you explain that?
Well, I see several reasons. First of all, they want to wait and see what happens and hoping that nothing happens. Sides change their mind or Washington administration changes its mind. That's probably one of the reasons. Another thing is they're already actively engaged. The very fact that Russia is not condemning it publicly or making any noise about this does not necessarily mean that they're not thinking about it. They're not doing something about this. First of all, they don't want to have yet another issue. They're going to get into confrontation with the White House, because right now they have a lot at their stake. They're discussing the Russia-Ukrainian peace. So that's, I think, one of the major reasons. And if you think about it, Joanne, they're also probably thinking, let this play on its own. Let's see what happens, because Russia already had card of pressure on Pashinyan government, that was change of constitution, knowing that that is going to bring a lot of trouble to the Pashinyan government to defend itself. But now another sort of big chunk has been added, which is Sunik Zangezur region, when you will be basically leasing the land for a very long period, for decades, to foreign actor, United States. So probably Moscow realizes that it creates new condition where it's going to make Pashinyan's life even harder to fight for the votes in the upcoming elections on June 7, 2026. So in a way, I believe one of the reasons it seemed to be sort of low-key may have something to do with that. And because it is aware that it is going to make the pro-Russian opposition stronger in Armenia with this new amendment added.
So finally, in Azerbaijan, the Azerbaijani official news agency, Azirtaj, has protested an op-ed in the national interest, which argued that President Aliyev should be responsible before any peace treaty is signed. The author specifically called for the release of Armenian political prisoners as a precondition for peace. How do you see this playing out?
I'm not aware of the specific piece that you mentioned, but I believe the very idea, the very notion that there should be obligations or responsibility before signing peace, I totally agree with that, because there are currently almost 400 political prisoners in Azerbaijan, and many of them are prisoners of conscience, and many of which have long advocated for peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So having these people who wanted peace and democracy, human rights, rule of law behind bars, what does that mean when you go into peace with such conditions? It means that if there is no rule of law, peace obligation will not be implemented, because anything that officials sign for should be supported by the society, by its press, by its politicians. So I do feel that there is a common sense in there. And I do believe that any peace treaty should be either conditional or be accompanied by conditions like that. That because it's not just a peace between countries; it's peace between people, and first of all with your own people. So if you put your critics into the jail, obviously it does not speak very well about your obligations before law.